Hello, I'm Jeffrey Copeland, author of Olivia's Story, The Conspiracy of Heroes Behind Shelley versus Kraemer. I'd like to share with you the journey I took to find the background information I needed to write this story. It was a journey that took me all across this country and even to Europe. It was a journey like I'd never taken before and one for which I'll truly be grateful the rest of my life. The roots of Olivia's Story can actually be traced to the writing of this book, Inman's War, a soldier's story of life in a colored battalion in World War II. Many know this book came about quite by accident. I was actually at a large flea market in Belleville, Illinois, one Sunday morning several years back when I came to a table where a dealer had an old suitcase full of letters. I looked through the letters and they were all written during World War II. There were about 150 of them from a Sergeant Inman Perkins to an Olivia Merriweather back in St. Louis. I stood there and read a couple of the letters, and something in the voice and the writing touched me deeply. The letters told of Sergeant Perkins' experiences in what was called, at the time, because of segregation in the military, a colored battalion. His unit was the 449th Colored Signal Construction Battalion of the Army Air Corps. The letters were incredibly detailed, and I decided on the spot I wanted to know more about this man and the woman he was writing to back in St. Louis. So I bought the letters, started reading them, and found out almost immediately I had in front of me a story that had never been told before, a personal account of a soldier's experiences in a colored battalion. In addition to the historical significance of the story told in these letters, I discovered another bonus. I found out quickly these were very influential people, and I knew their stories had to be told. After conducting the necessary background research, I wrote Inman's War. I was proud to tell that story and very pleased that Hollywood discovered it. It is now being made into a movie. But after writing Inman's War, I realized I was only halfway finished. There was still Olivia's story. I had some 30 letters from Olivia back to Inman. In those letters, I had the voice of a very special person, one who touched the lives of so many at the high school where she taught, Charles Sumner High School in St. Louis, Missouri. Sumner was the first high school west of the Mississippi River built for African Americans. She taught there for over 40 years, and some of the students going through her halls were Tina Turner, Dick Gregory, Chuck Berry, Arthur Ashe, and a long list of other people successful in such areas as law, politics, and medicine. So I went beyond the events of the first book and focused my research this time on the life of this amazing woman, Olivia Merriweather Perkins. Yes, she was Sergeant Perkins' wife, but I didn't know that when I first started reading the letters. They had to hide their marriage because even in the 1940s in St. Louis, if a woman who was a teacher got married, she had to give up her career. Olivia loved teaching, so she and Inman hid their marriage. As it eventually turned out, she was allowed to keep her position after the school board found them out, but this was only because of special circumstances. Circumstances that I won't go into here. You'll have to read the book. As I researched her life, I visited with those who knew her best, her relatives, friends, former students, and others. On the one hand, I found out what I already knew. She was an inspirational teacher who touched the lives of so many. What I didn't know until digging deeper was that she was responsible, both directly and behind the scenes, for one of the most important U.S. Supreme Court rulings. This came up every time I interviewed anyone about Olivia. She literally helped change the face of a nation. To be perfectly honest, I started writing Olivia's story as an account of her life and teaching career at Charles Sumner High School. For me, that would have been a good enough story in and of itself because of the history it presented. Sumner was and is a very famous school. However, about 2 chapters in, I was interviewing one of Olivia's cousins when she asked me if I knew about a murder related to the story. Needless to say, that got my attention. I stopped writing and started looking into this to see if it really was true. Then, while interviewing someone else who knew Olivia and her friends back in the 1940s, I found out about a second murder. I again stopped writing and started digging for more details. These murders were unsolved, and while those who committed these crimes were never discovered, the crimes themselves had great significance for the story. After researching the events surrounding these as much as I could, I started writing again. At that time, I went to talk with another one of Olivia's relatives, and again I was asked if I knew about the murder. I asked back, which one? They were starting to pile up. Imagine my surprise when the murder she described was not one of the two I already knew about. At this point, I got rid of the 2 chapters I had already written and I started over. This time, the focus was on the story I knew had to be told. Yes, I added the murders, but they're not the focus here. The real story was Olivia's involvement in the famous Shelley versus Kraemer legal battle, a battle that led to the Supreme Court ruling that did, as I said before, change the color of the American landscape. It was a decision that ended racially restrictive real estate covenants, not just in St. Louis, but all across America. If you can imagine this, even in the 1940s, many people were still not allowed to live where they wanted to because of the color of their skin. Olivia and her friends were driving forces behind the end of this, behind this revolutionary change. As I wrote this story, I learned about events so important to the history of this country, but the real story for me was what I learned about a brave and determined group of people. These people, 5 in particular, came together without regard for their own personal safety and well-being to help make this country a better place for everyone. And they did this all with pride, dignity, and respect. They were also pretty darn sneaky and pulled off one of the greatest capers I think I've ever run across. I hope, readers will have the same reaction to the events that I did: surprise, admiration, and gratitude. So I had a story with murder, mystery, intrigue, love, and a great caper. I couldn't wait to tell it. Through Olivia's story, I hope readers will understand a little more about the sacrifices made by so many who came before us. Their sacrifices, their actions will never be forgotten. We can't forget them. We just can't. I hope you enjoy Olivia's story. After you finish reading it, jot me a note in care of Paragon House and let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear from you. Enjoy.